It started with smoke on the horizon, villages burned, people vanished, and no one knew who was next.
In April 1241, the Mongols hit Europe like a storm. No army could match their speed, no wall could stop them. And now, they were heading straight for Poland. Most people in Europe had only heard stories, horsemen from the east who destroyed everything in their path.
Some said they were demons, others thought they were God's punishment.
But for Duke Henry of Silesia, they were very real, and they were coming for him.
He didn't have much time. His allies were days away, his army small and nervous.
But Henry believed Poland could stand. He didn't know this battle would change how Europe saw the Mongols, and how fear itself would shape the continent.
How do you fight an enemy you barely understand? Before Legnica, before Europe even knew their names, the Mongols had already crushed the world's greatest armies.
From the frozen steppes of Mongolia to the walls of Kiev, they left nothing but ruins.
They moved like smoke, striking fast, disappearing faster. Their leader, Subutai, was the mastermind, a general who could command armies across thousands of miles without losing control. After Genghis Khan's death, his empire didn't slow down, it expanded.
His grandson, Batu Khan and Subutai launched a campaign into the west.
Their goal was simple: test Europe's strength before taking it.
They tore through Russia, destroyed major cities like Vladimir and Kiev, and reached Poland with terrifying precision.
One medieval record, the Chronicle of Jan Długosz, described how entire towns were erased overnight.
Families vanished, churches burned, and rivers ran red.
The Mongols didn't conquer slowly, they struck once and vanished.
To the terrified survivors, it felt less like war and more like a punishment sent from the sky. By early 1441, Europe had no idea how close the storm was. Messengers from the east were ignored.
Warnings from Hungary came too late. Poland was about to face an enemy no one truly understood, and Subutai had already planned every move.
When the storm finally reached Poland, there would be no escape. By the spring of 1241, fear had already spread across Europe. News of Mongol raids in the east reached every court and monastery. People whispered about entire kingdoms burning in a single night, but no one knew how to stop them. Not the knights, not the kings, not even the church.
Rulers began blaming each other. Some thought it was a punishment for their sins.
Others believed the Mongols were sent by the devil.
In Poland, Duke Henry II the Pious tried to unite his neighbors, the Teutonic Knights, the Templars, and local nobles.
But they distrusted one another more than the enemy itself.
Henry's army was small, a mix of knights, peasants, and a few foreign allies. Some joined out of faith, others out of fear.
A Polish chronicle says they carried crosses on their shields, hoping God would protect them. But against the Mongols, faith alone wouldn't be enough. A modern historian, Peter Jackson, wrote that Europe didn't understand the Mongols. They weren't raiders, they were strategists.
Henry didn't know it yet, but the Mongols had already planned to lure him out, make him chase them, and destroy him far from his fortress.
Henry thought he was hunting the enemy, but in truth the enemy was already hunting him. The Mongols didn't fight like anyone in Europe. They never stayed in one place.
They didn't build walls, they used the land as their weapon. While Batu Khan led the main force toward Hungary, Subutai sent Baidar and Orda north toward Poland.
It wasn't a random attack. It was a plan, a diversion to keep the Europeans divided.
Their scouts moved ahead, fast and silent. They mapped every river, every forest trail. Mongol intelligence was unmatched. They knew the terrain better than locals did.
They used fake retreats to pull their enemies apart. To Europeans, it looked like panic.
But to Subutai, it was math. Every move calculated, every pursuit expected. On April 8, 1241, Henry's army finally found them near the plains of Legnica,
The Mongols appeared smaller in number, tired, maybe even scared. That's exactly what Subutai wanted Henry to think. The next day, Henry ordered his troops to attack.
But the Mongols were waiting. Hidden units circled behind the hills watching.
When Henry advanced, they began to pull back, slowly at first, then faster.
The Poles thought victory was near. They chased. The Mongols smiled. The trap was closed.
It wasn't chaos, it was choreography, and Europe had just stepped into the dance.
Morning broke over Legnica, April 9, 1241. Thick fog rolled across the plains, and the sound of horns echoed through the valley.
Henry's army, knights from Poland, Bohemia, and the Teutonic Order, lined up in full armor. In front of them, the Mongols waited in eerie silence. The first clash came fast. Mongol arrows darkened the sky, whistling through armor gaps.
European knights charged, heavy and loud, their banners fluttering. For a moment, it looked like they were winning. Mongol lions fell back, retreating in chaos.
But this was the act. Subutai's plan was unfolding perfectly. As Henry's troops pushed forward, Mongol horns sounded again from behind them.
Hidden cavalry units had circled around. Smoke bombs filled the air, blinding the knights. Confusion turned to panic. Henry tried to regroup. He shouted orders, but his banners were lost in the haze.
The Teutonic knights fought bravely, surrounded. The Mongols closed in, firing from every angle. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was an execution.
By noon, he was over. Henry's head was taken as a trophy. The Mongols hung it on a spear and paraded it before the city walls. For Europe, this was not just defeat, it was terror made real.
Europe had just seen what the East could do, and it was only the beginning.
When news of Legnica spread, panic moved faster than the Mongols themselves.
From Poland to the Holy Roman Empire, bells rang. Messengers rode through the night, shouting warnings. The Mongols are coming!
Chroniclers described chaos everywhere. Cities fortified their walls, nobles gathered armies, and churches filled with prayers for mercy.
Some believed it was the end of the world. One monk wrote, "They move like demons, born from the east." In Vienna and Prague, people packed their belongings, ready to flee. But the Mongols didn't come.
They suddenly turned east, retreating across the plains. To many, it felt like a miracle, but to others, it was even more frightening.
Historians later explained it. The great Khan Ogadin had died in Mongolia.
The Mongol generals returned home to choose a new ruler. Europe had been saved, not by strength, but by timing.
For the first time, Europe realized the world was far bigger than it thought, and far more dangerous. The Mongols had reached their doorstep and vanished like smoke. But the fear they left behind stayed for generations.
Europe had survived by accident, but would it survive the next storm?
Years later, the fields of Legnica grew quiet again. Grass covered the bones, and villages rebuilt from ashes.
But stories of that terrible day never faded. Parents warned their children, "Beware the riders from the east." From the Chronicles of Jan Długosz, Poland remembered its fall as a lesson of unity, that divided hearts can't stand against a storm.
Modern historians like Peter Jackson later echoed that same idea. Europe's strength was never its walls, but its cooperation. Meanwhile, in the steppes of Mongolia, the Mongols spoke of Europe not with hate, but with curiosity. Oral tales tell that Subutai, the mastermind behind the invasion, respected his enemies for their courage, even when they lost. The Battle of Legnica was more than a clash of armies, it was a meeting of worlds.
East and West faced each other for the first time, testing their strength, fear, and belief in destiny.
Centuries later, the echoes of that battle still whisper through history, not as a story of defeat or victory, but as a reminder that fear often shapes nations more than war itself. Maybe that's the real legacy of Legnica, that strength alone doesn't define survival. Wisdom, unity, and timing do.
Because sometimes history's greatest victories come from simply surviving